Coming up, the NTSB speaks out about third-class medical reform. We fly with Sean D. Tucker. A look at how the Great War was won, and remembering EA founder Paul Poberezny through home-built aircraft. AOPA Live this week begins in just a moment.
As far as the Verb camera goes, it's the solution. We've used every other action camera and we've thrown them all away or given them away because now we have 5 Verbs and they're all over our airplanes and we wouldn't use anything else.
There's no supporting data, but that doesn't stop some folks from opining on medical certificate reform. Hello everyone and welcome to AOPA Live this week. I'm Tom Haynes. There's absolutely no data to prove that a third-class medical certificate makes general aviation safer. Light sport and glider pilots without medical certificates, they've been flying a long time with no significant medical incapacitations. But nonetheless, some think that despite the evidence, medical certificates are a good idea. The latest, the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, testifying before a House committee last week, he was asked about the Rakita Graves bill that would allow private pilots to fly without a medical certificate.
Well, we're very concerned about pilots flying without inadequate medical standards. And,
right.
But we base our policy based on what we see in accidents, and so far we haven't seen enough accidents to warrant an agency position on it yet. But we are very concerned not only about not having to have a medical, but then in addition to that, if you don't have a medical, you're less likely to pay attention to the FAA's list of prohibited legal drugs, as well as obviously the illegal drugs, but also the legal drugs, and we're concerned that that list will not be paid attention to by people who don't have a medical.
Representative Gerald Connolly of Virginia asked Hart the question, and Representative Connolly opined.
Here we are having a hearing on, the utilization and potential harmful effects of any kind of drug or controlled substance in the operation of any kind of vehicle, and meanwhile there is apparently legislation that would exempt a subclass of people who fly airplanes. And I can't believe for a minute that if we really are concerned about the use of marijuana or any other drug, that we would ever countenance legislation like this. I cannot believe that could come to any good.
So what should we in the subclass be doing to keep medical certificate reform moving forward? We asked Mark Baker, who's traveling around the country this week on AOPA Business.
I joined this thing about exactly a year ago, and I listened to members long and hard for the last 12 months. I know this is the #1 issue. What I do feel good about is that it's finally out of the FAA's office and out into rulemaking. Now, we don't know exactly what the rule says, but it's making progress. There are only like another 9 or 10 days left of Congress in terms of in session for the kind of fall season. And I'm worried, but we're going to make sure that we're communicating with them. We're going to ask members to communicate even harder to try and get more co-sponsors signed up with us and continue to drive the congressional support, which in turn puts the pressure on the FAA and OMB to do the right thing, which we all know is to modify the third-class medical. We at AOPA do anything other than continue to push as hard as we possibly can the agenda of our members. But we also recognize there's a time when we have to say, well, let them take their lead right now, because they have actually made a move for the first time in a dozen years. So let's see what it is. It's not my kind of speed. I'm not happy with the speed. Don't be confused that I have patience for this. But I also recognize that we've finally got something happening.
Well, the FAA administrator didn't exactly wow us at AirVenture, but the rest of the show, it was pretty good. EA Chairman Jack Pelton said the show was the best event in years. They filled up the parking areas with aircraft. More than 8,000 flew in. Attendance was up an estimated 5%. They say more than 500,000 folks strolled the AirVenture grounds. Lots of news and news people, too. You can read some of the news from AirVenture 2014 on our website. The address there on your screen. And you'll want to watch our 3 special shows from AirVenture for a little different take on the experience. Now, speaking of an experience, one lucky pilot got to find out firsthand what it's like to be in a cockpit with Sean D. Tucker, ringing it out in the skies over Oshkosh. Jim Moore has that story.
Sean Tucker is not just a legendary airshow performer, he's also the chairman of EAA's Young Eagles program. And he's got a very energetic way of saying thank you.
The volunteers are our heroes. I mean, the volunteers are the ones that sacrifice their time, their money, and share their passion with flight with all these kids across North America. And this is just my way of paying the volunteers back, and just a small thank you.
If this is Sean Tucker's idea of a small thank you, one wonders what a big thank you might involve. Aaron Wipshinski got the ride of his life on Friday afternoon, a Young Eagle turned pilot who was given more than 200 rides in 4 years.
You know, I got my first Young Eagle ride shortly after starting my first flight lesson, and it's what really opened my eyes to general aviation and what it was like to share the passion of flight. And you know, that stuck with me the rest of my life. Air Academy furthered that even more. We still camp together. There's about 20 of us over in Camp Scholler right now that are still all camping together. And you know, it's a great experience. And the passion and the way that everyone's helped me along through the years has just really instilled that passion in me to share. And you know, that's what I love most about flying. That's why I don't own a single seat aircraft, because I always like to take someone up with me when I'm flying and give someone else the opportunity to experience that.
Tucker spent a little more than 20 minutes whipping Wipshinski around, introducing some advanced aerobatic moves, including an outside loop, hammerheads, and a snap roll.
So we're at about 290, 300 degrees a second, and then I could just add a little nuance to it, and the wing stalls, and it just, I mean, that's the one that his head went like that. He went, whoa. that was a good thing.
I was like, all right, my head's still spinning, but the airplane's not.
Yeah, that's when we're trying to roll their eyeballs around. You know? I think, and then the flat spin.
Yeah.
So it was a good day in the neighborhood. We had fun.
That is too.
We got
side went really well. So it was really smooth.
Okay, great. Well, I got to tell you, he's got talent. He's got talent. He learns really quickly.
Aaron and Sean, smile for the camera.
You can take those last two lines there. They're all yours.
But look at this. Look at the smile on his face. Look at how much he cares. That's our EA family, and this is what's so cool about what we're doing is he loves everything what aviation represents: the friendship, the mentorship, and the giving back. And Aaron's a perfect example, and also he's a pretty smart guy.
A smart guy with a strong stomach. With Team Oracle and AirVenture, I'm Jim Moore, AOPA Live.
Thanks, Jim. Boy, Sean, it's hard to contain him. He's a little over-caffeinated, I like to say to him. Anyhow, coming up, a plethora of aviation flicks this week, and a visit to Paul Poberezny's workshop and the airplane that inspired a generation. AOPA Live this week continues in just a moment.
From your first skyward glance, the dream of flight compelled you. And from your first glimpse of a Cirrus, you realized that dream had a name. Cirrus Aircraft. Go where you've never been before.
Welcome back. You're watching AOPA Live this week. Well, what's in your hangar? The FAA has drafted a new policy to better define what is acceptable use of hangars on federally funded airports. The idea is to ensure that non-aeronautical activities don't displace aviation uses. But even though this draft guidance is better than some past interpretations in some regions, it could still be better.
There's some things that we'd like to see change, and we're going to be pushing back in a couple of areas. For one thing, as you said, we think that building an aircraft in a hangar is absolutely an aeronautical use of the hangar. And the issue that's at the heart of this is about aeronautical utility of the hangar and by extension of the airport. And we think that the FAA ought to construe that concept, aeronautical utility, a little more broadly than they've been doing in certainly in the past and even in this new statement. So we're going to be going back to them with our thoughts on what the guidance ought to suggest.
The draft policy says you can't do a lot of the work on a home built in a hangar except for final assembly. If you want to comment on the policy, go to the address there on your screen. Out in a hangar on Phelps Field in Spokane, Washington, meanwhile, is a company that has made a business of turning the tame into a tiger. AOPA Live executive producer Warren Morningstar takes us inside rocket engineering.
The whole idea of rocket engineering was to take certified airplanes and make them better.
And Darwin Conrad has been doing that for nearly 25 years at Rocket Engineering. The engineer turned corporate pilot turned modifier figured out the formula.
I figured if we took and put Pratt & Whitney engines on a good airplane, we'd have a fantastic airplane, and that's what we have with the jet prop, the Bonanza.
Conrad hung a PT-6 on the front end of a Malibu before Piper thought about it, and he says the jet prop is a better airplane than the Meridian.
The jet prop it has a Dash 35 engine on it, much more efficient. We're burning about 33 gallons an hour. They're burning about 42 gallons an hour for the same speed. We're able to keep the nose baggage area. The PT-6-35 is a lot less money for maintenance.
Turbine power does wonders for the Duke, too.
So it just totally changed the performance of the airplane. We've had several people say it's the Mini King, so it's kind of like a Mini King Air.
But for Rocket Engineering, the most important thing is taking care of their customers.
Our main goal is to make a better airplane, make a safer airplane, and to take care of our customers. I think that's the most important part. When you get a car worked on, you want to make sure that they take care of you. And on an airplane, we feel we should even do a better job than the car companies.
In Spokane, Washington, Warren Morningstar, AOPA Live.
Thanks, Warren. Those are quite the machines they build. Rocket Engineering will be one of our hosts on August 16th for the AOPA fly-in at Felts Field. You can find out more and RSVP on our website. And if you'd like to volunteer, we'd love your help. Well, all of a sudden, we seem to have a plethora of aviation films, and that's a good thing. Some of these films previewed at AirVenture this year, including one called The Millionaire Unit. This is a documentary about the earliest combat pilots, and it's fitting to be talking about that this week as the world marks the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the war that was supposed to end all wars. Mark Wortman wrote the book that inspired the film.
What really grabbed me was when I started reading the letters of one of the members of the group, a guy named Kenneth McLeish, whose brother happened to be Archibald McLeish, who later on was a poet laureate of the U.S. And Kenny was talking about, writing about this mission he was on, flying over Belgium when his aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire. And he was struggling to regain control of the aircraft, and it sailed out over neutral Holland. And at that point he could have ditched, but he regained partial control of the aircraft, and he turned around, flew back over Belgium, facing the anti-aircraft fire again, to fight another day. And I just thought, there's something amazing about that heroism, that willingness to sacrifice yourself, and it just carried me into the story and went from there.
Millionaire's Unit was an elite group of college kids from Yale who formed a flying club which later became the founding squadron of the U.S. Naval Air Reserve. Members of that unit later became the civilian leaders of U.S. aviation all the way through the Korean War and beyond. The producers of the Millionaire Unit hope to distribute the film next year. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And one of several documentaries about R.A. Bob Hoover, Flying the Feathered Edge, it's called, previewed to a private audience at AirVenture. The film's world premiere set for this Sunday at the Rhode Island International Film Festival. You can find out more at the address on your screen. And finally, the man who brought you 1-6 Right has a new film aimed at a general audience this time. Aviation, The Invisible Highway, is the story of how the airplane changed the world.
This year marks the 100th anniversary of commercial aviation, the everyday miracle that's transformed our world, connecting countries and cultures, expanding horizons and minds. As pilots, it's a special moment to celebrate this thing we love so much that we proudly keep a running total of every hour we spend doing it. But in the sky, we're all the same, and I love that. Maybe flying provides something similar to you, another layer to your identity, another perspective on the world and your place in it. We want everyone to know that feeling, and that's why I'm proud to be part of an unprecedented new film, Aviation, The Invisible Highway. This documentary celebrates and explores with breathtaking visuals the wonder of aviation and how the airplane has changed the world. Many of you know Brian Terwilliger from his film 1-6 Right. If that film was for those of us in the cockpit, this film is for everyone in the back of the airplane. What I hope you'll do is help us share it. Tell your family and friends. Get the word out in your communities, the ones on the ground and in the air. As EAA and AOPA members, we're uniquely positioned to lead the grassroots movement that will help shape people's perception and appreciation of aviation.
The film is scheduled for release next year. You can see the trailer at aviationtheinvisiblehighway.com. And returning to Oshkosh, this is the first year since the passing of EAA founder Paul Poberezny. His friendly smile was known to millions of us through the years. AOPA Live's Paul Harrop found those who are keeping his spirit alive through the airplane that started it all.
The crowds may have been bigger this year, but AirVenture has never felt so empty. It's the first Oshkosh without aviation's elder statesman tooling around in his familiar red VW, greeting anyone he could with a smile.
I mean, I know he's still with us in spirit, but to not see Red 1 driving around is definitely, there's a gap there.
AirVenture is so big you can't really take it all in. All of the people, all of the spectacle, all of the grandeur can all be traced back to one simple parasol-winged airplane. In 1955, the Experimental Aircraft Association was a tiny group with Paul Poberezny at the helm. He was ever the PR man, so he took the opportunity to write a series of articles for Mechanics Illustrated, a how-to publication. He would detail how to build a baby ace in your own home for less than $800, engine included.
It really convinced a lot of people to build aircraft.
In the optimistic post-war America, the May, June, and July series resonated. Within 3 days of the publication, more than 100 letters poured in.
And suddenly he was inundated with mail to his home because he was running the EAA basically out of his basement at that time. And he literally told me he had to go out and buy a larger mailbox just so that the post office could deliver all the letters from around the world of people interested in this idea of building your own aircraft.
The article's success built EAA from the home-based builders group to the international organization that it is today. Paul would go on to live every aviator's wildest dreams, piloting just about everything that would fly and building airplanes his entire life. Flash forward to 2011. Paul's humble aeroplane factory tucked away inside a red barn on the EAA grounds was yet again teeming with a new project. It would be a replica of the Mechanics Illustrated Baby Ace. Paul brushed off the old plans and started teaching a new generation how it's done.
I didn't know what to expect when I first showed up on my first Saturday when we were starting construction of the fuselage. I wasn't sure if Paul would just show up. I mean, he was in his late 80s at the time, and I wasn't sure if he'd just show up, give us a few hints, and then disappear while we did all the work. But he stayed there all day long, and we worked Saturdays and some Sundays, pretty much all throughout the winter, building the fuselage. It was an amazing experience. He always had that can-do attitude.
Kurt Meir had been working on airplanes with Paul since the early 90s. He was excited to roll up his sleeves with him again. Charlie Becker was new to home building, but helped out with the back-to-basics build.
It wasn't until I volunteered to help him on the Baby Ace project that I really felt like I got to know him really well on a really personal level.
Charlie's dad had recently passed, and he found an adoptive paternal figure in sport aviation's living legend.
It was just great to have the founder of EAA showing you how to cut tubing on a Baby Ace, and how to put the tubings in place, and showing you the ropes.
He was in the master's workshop where all were welcome, and Paul shared his knowledge freely.
He knew that everyone had something to contribute, and he knew how to bring that out of people. And that's something that I have taken away from my time with him.
The build continued. Then one day in August 2013, Paul Poberezny flew west. Paul's family knew how significant the Baby Ace replica was and wanted Kurt to see the project through.
I felt very honored that they would put that responsibility on me, and I took it very seriously.
Kurt's home EAA Chapter 640 decided to finish the last airplane Paul ever started.
We wanted to keep the idea of the airplane factory alive, and so what we did was invite the general public in and anybody with an interest in aviation to come in and work on the project as a tribute to Paul and keeping alive the spirit of the airplane factory.
They kept plugging away until it became a race to beat the clock.
It came right down to the wire, and guys put into a lot of sleepless nights to get it finished.
Then, in this spirit of aviation, the community rallied, and the airplane was finished just days before AirVenture 2014.
The first time I flew it, I definitely felt a presence in the cockpit. It was, you know, it was an emotional time then.
The last airplane Paul Poberezny built, a replica of the airplane that made EAA what it is today, flew some of its first hours to the first AirVenture without the man who started it all.
Just seeing it land here was quite emotional for me.
Out of humble beginnings, Paul Poberezny grew to become one of a kind. He once said he ended up being a millionaire because he has a million friends, most of whom came to know Paul through Oshkosh.
The one thing that I learned from Paul more than anything else is Paul loved people. And it didn't matter if you were somebody important or not. It didn't matter what your day job was. If you loved airplanes, Paul loved you.
All those connections, all those lives touched, all because of one, now two, little red airplanes. In Oshkosh, Paul Harrop, AOPA Live.
Thanks, Paul. We all miss seeing Paul Poberezny around the show this year. That 1955 Mechanics Illustrated Baby Ace hung in the EAA Welcome Center this year throughout AirVenture. You can find it year-round in the EAA Museum. And that's it for this week. A special shout out to all of the AOPA Live This Week viewers who stopped by the AOPA tent at the show to say hello. Great to hear from you. And remember, you can catch all of our coverage from AirVenture 2014 a little further back on the channel. We did 3 episodes from Oshkosh. Thanks for watching this week. I'm Tom Haynes. See you next Thursday.